Hello there, 1, 2. Hello there, 1, 2. Hello there, 1, 2. How are you? I want to start this week by thanking the people who helped me create this podcast. You know, I'm kind of like a digital street performer, I guess. I put my work out there, and the people who see it, they choose if they want to support it or not by tipping or giving back. And I use your support, your tips, your gifts to keep going, to come back and create more and share it with the world. So thank you to all who have helped me keep going. Thank you for your support. Now, are you ready to go back to the Full Circle Games Park? Let's go there right now in 3, 2, and play. Welcome to the Lesbian Romantic Podcast. This is More Than Fun and Games, Part 6, The Sage. How did it go? Leah squeaked as soon as Emily stepped inside the hotel room. Emily walked into the living area with a spring in her step. A wide smile took over her face as she ran a hand through her hair. Great, I guess. Leah moved to the edge of her seat and paused the cartoon she had been watching. Emily pointed at the other corner of the room. Ordered room service? Shaking her head, Leah explained, No, Jahani's assistant called me to ask what I wanted for breakfast. Emily's lips parted. Really? Yes, Leah said. I'll tell you later. First, please tell me about your meeting. What can I say? Jahani is very impressive, Emily replied, walking over to the table and picking up a leftover strawberry from Leah's plate. Leah fidgeted with the waistband of her PJ shorts. What did you two talk about? Taking off her blazer, Emily said, It's hard to explain. We talked about so many things. She hung the blazer over a chair. Frowning a little, Leah asked, Like what? Emily straightened and stared at the wall with the TV. One of the armadillo characters from the ride yesterday was frozen in place on the screen. She asked me why I haven't found a new job. Okay, Leah said, getting up from the chair. What did you say? I told her the truth, Emily said, shrugging, that I have no idea what to do next. Sounds like an odd job interview, Leah chuckled, scratching the back of her neck. Actually, that's the really weird thing, Emily continued. We didn't even talk about a job yet. You didn't? Leah asked, lowering her hand. I thought she wanted to offer you a job here. Emily nodded. I know. She asked to see me again about that tomorrow morning. Leah felt the tiniest pang of disappointment. She had thought they would have the rest of the week to themselves to enjoy the park together. So, will you? She asked. Of course, Emily said. I'm curious to hear what she has to say. Joining Emily at the table, Leah asked, What else did you two talk about then? Emily pulled back a chair. Gosh, where to start? She told me about why she started Full Circle Games. She popped another strawberry into her mouth. Half wary, half curious, Leah took a seat as well. Why did she? Emily swallowed before explaining. She felt like I did at Sandra's Tech. Leah tilted her head. That she wasn't using all of her talents? And not for the right cause, Emily replied. Armies across the globe bought her chip in large quantities as soon as it was commercially available. That was a big wake-up call for her, she said. Okay, that's interesting. She felt guilty about all the money she made? Leah asked, placing her elbows on the table. I guess, yes. Emily nodded enthusiastically. And I get that. I get a lot of what she was saying. She bit down on her lower lip as she thought for a moment. It was really nice to talk to someone who has gone through the same struggles. Leah smiled despite the tightening in her chest. She hadn't seen Emily this enthusiastic about anything or anyone work-related since they had met. She was happy for her. But she also felt like she had done something wrong. There were clearly some things she didn't understand. She certainly had tried to. Still, it sounded like Ayesha Jahani had done a better job. That's great, she said quietly. Hey, Emily said, stretching out her hand toward Leah. What's wrong? I'm sorry the meeting took longer than planned. Leah met her eyes and was tempted to say nothing. She knew Emily would know that she was lying, though. It was just so uncomfortable to tell her the truth. She didn't want to sound selfish or, God forbid, jealous. What made her want to start a gaming company? Leah asked instead. She believes we learn a lot about life while we are playing, Emily replied, entwining her fingers with Leah's. Right, like puppies do? Leah asked. Emily chuckled. Exactly. Except their playing is usually harmless and ours is not. Leah frowned. What do you mean? Ayesha wanted to create an alternative to violent games. No one ever dies or even gets seriously hurt in her games. Never. Ayesha? Leah thought. Emily was already on a first-name basis with Jahani. They really had hit it off instantly. That's true, Leah replied slowly, trying to focus on the conversation instead of the panicky voices in the back of her mind. Games can be very violent. So are movies and books, and Emily said, lifting her shoulders. Pretty much everything in our culture is violent. Leah considered this for a moment. She had never thought about it that way. She considered the thriller books she loved to read and wrinkled her nose. A lot of women were tortured and killed in them. Jahani has a point, she admitted. That's why this park feels so different, Emily continued more excitedly. She applied the same principles to this place. She wanted it to be fun, but loving. Loving? Leah giggled. Emily grinned. Her words. She sounds like a very inspiring person, Leah said somewhat reluctantly. Her eyes sparkling, Emily replied, She really is. Leah rubbed her upper arm. She understood why Emily was feeling all excited. But did she have to be this excited? Did she tell you why she wanted to meet you specifically? Leah asked, pushing herself to continue the conversation. Emily chuckled. No, she said she would tell me tomorrow. She had another meeting after breakfast. She squeezed Leah's hand. And I, of course, wanted to come see you. Leah smiled back. Hey, Ayesha told me about the best spots in the park, Emily said, her voice light and playful. Want to go check them out? Sure, Leah replied with more excitement than she actually felt. A few hours later, Leah had pretty much forgotten about her feelings earlier that morning. She was lying in a chair, looking up at the wonders that unfolded all around her. She had never seen anything like it. Emily and Leah had first tried a few other rides and had then come to this theater designed by Jahani. Here, full-length movies were played. There was one every 3 hours. The theater wasn't like any other movie theater, though. There were only a few chairs, which looked like recliners. You had to lean all the way back in them because the story was displayed on the dome above and around you. It was basically 3D taken to a whole new level. The characters walked around you or floated by just above your nose. It had been slightly disorienting at first. Now, though, Leah was wholly immersed in the story. Audrey, young one, where do you want to go now? The sage asked. The character hovered in space and was more spirit than human. The main character of the story, a young space explorer who had left her planet in search of a treasure that would set her free, frowned in frustration. I thought you would tell me. You keep sending me to the wrong places. The sage smiled, floating in front of the small spaceship that looked exactly like the bed in Emily and Leah's hotel room. I only send you where you think you need to go next, the sage answered, her voice calm and resonating around the dome. Maybe it's not the place that matters, but what you do once you get there. Leah took in Audrey's face as the character frowned again. Leah couldn't believe how detailed these 3D projections were. She was already wondering what Emily would have to say about the technology. I don't understand what you mean, Audrey said, clearly getting impatient. What do you do once you arrive on a new planet? the sage answered. I start looking for the treasure, Audrey replied hotly. Leah smiled because she thought she knew where this was going. She doubted the treasure would be hidden on a planet somewhere. Where do you look? The sage asked patiently, still hovering in front of the spaceship. Everywhere, Audrey replied, pointing to her right. In the mountains and in the tunnels below them. In the cities and in the villages around them. And have you asked for help? Replied the sage. Yes. I have asked so many if they knew about the treasure that would set me free, Audrey said, her young cheeks flushing with frustration. Perhaps you have looked in the wrong places still, the sage said. Okay, you've lost me, Audrey said bluntly while throwing her hands up in the air. Leah giggled. Emily laughed too. They turned their heads to look at each other. The light of the movie projection gave Emily's face a bluish glow. I love you, Emily mouthed. Leah beamed back at her. I love you too, she whispered. Being lost is an excellent place to start from, said the sage. Audrey huffed. It doesn't feel that way. Emily was looking at the movie again. Her expression had grown serious. Leah wondered what she was thinking. Emily had been lost for a while now too. Was she too looking for a treasure that would set her free? Leah couldn't help but feel responsible for Emily's struggle. If Emily hadn't met Leah, she would probably still be working at Sanders Tech. Emily had changed her whole life for Leah, while Leah had done very little. Fuck, I should have been way more supportive this morning, Leah suddenly thought. Here's Emily giving up everything for you, and when she finally gets excited about something again, you get jealous? Goosebumps rose on Leah's arms. It was an uncomfortable truth to admit to herself. Yes, she was jealous of Ayesha Jahani and all of her crazy cool inventions. Leah didn't think of herself as a jealous person. She never had been. Why was she jealous now? Maybe because she felt like something had changed between her and Emily? Was it because they had decided to move in together? Was that why there seemed to be more pressure on them? Or had some things built up between them without either of them noticing? Leah cleared her throat and quickly looked back up at the movie. Audrey was already flying to the next planet. Leah had missed whatever else the sage had said. Maybe the sage can help me understand, she wondered. Then she remembered how Audrey couldn't get the sage to tell her where to look for the treasure. I guess we'll have to figure it out on our own, Audrey, Leah thought and shifted in her seat. This was part 6 of More Than Fun and Games. You know, creating this short sequel to the blogger story has been fun, but also challenging because I'm doing so much with Full Circle Games, and it doesn't exist. So I have to come up with this park that doesn't exist and sort of like dream up my own personal, I guess, dream theme park. And it has made writing more challenging, but more fun also. So I hope you enjoy hanging out at Full Circle Games Park. I need to come up with a better name, really. So wanted to share that. Thank you again to all the people who support my work. It means the world to me. Like I said in the intro, you know, putting my work out there is one thing, but to receive support from others and encouragement and people giving back, it's just such a blessing, and it helps me to keep going. And I really want to keep going. I love doing this work, and I don't think I love many things more than sharing my stories with you. So thank you. All right, that's all for this episode. Oh wait, almost forgot. I've got some bloopers for you. She considered the thriller books she loved to read. Leah couldn't believe how detailed these Leah couldn't believe how detailed these 3D projections were. Leah couldn't believe how detailed these 3D Leah couldn't believe how detailed these 3D projections. Thank you so much for listening again, and I hope to see you on the community or here on this podcast channel in 2 weeks. Stay safe, take good care of each other and yourself, and I will see you again soon.